And please stay tuned. Clay Eals, who has written what is the definitive biography of Steve Goodman. It weighs in. It's 700 some pages, complete with a sort of tribute CD. I'll play a bit of one of the songs from that CD, and also it has some interviews with Stevie, and it was very haunting for me to hear his voice again. He died way too young. You're listening to the Voice of Chicago, News Talk 720 WGN Chicago, a Tribune broadcasting station. It's 8 o'clock on a chilly Sunday morning. And
News Talk 720
WGN.
This is the Sunday Papers with Rick Kogan.
Good morning, everybody. There are 24-some people in here, all of them unbelievably attractive for a Sunday morning. They're part of this great Chicago Places and Spaces tour. They're here to investigate the secrets of the Sunday papers, and I don't have a clue. But please enjoy whatever we do. Clay Eals, who I first talked to maybe, I don't know, Clay, 3-4 years ago, and he said, I'm working on this book. I'm working on a Steve Goodman biography. It is, without doubt, the definitive story of Steve Goodman's life, called Facing the Music. It is 700-some pages with a lovely CD that contains a lot of tribute. I'm going to play one of the songs. And it also, the haunting thing for me, Clay, was that interview segment with Steve. I hadn't heard his voice not singing in a long time. There are many people here, some of you from the exotic clime of Wisconsin, who don't know who Steve Goodman was. This is perfect. You've got an audience here. How many of you don't know who Steve Goodman was? Raise your hands again. Wow, it's about half. Isn't that interesting?
It is, but Goodman was not a household word in the sense that we think of, but all of you here and many of you out there listening do know Goodman, even if you think you don't know Goodman. I mean, most everybody knows the song City of New Orleans, and they think of Arlo Guthrie when they think of that. Good Morning, America, how are you? Even if that doesn't ring a bell, if you're a Buffett fan, several songs of Jimmy Buffett, the quintessential Jimmy Buffett song, Banana Republics, that's a Goodman song.
Yeah.
And man, if you've ever been to Wrigley and they've won, which is sometimes a rare occurrence, you know the song that they play at the very end and the whole stadium is rocking to it, Go Cubs Go, that's a Goodman song. I mean, there's so many places. This guy was everywhere, and Goodman people are everywhere. Some of them just don't know it.
True. How did you become? Did you only see him? I pride myself on reading the entire book of anybody who's a guest, but this took me a little off guard when it arrived Tuesday, and I said, well, I'm halfway through, and it's fascinating. I mean, it is so detailed. You only saw him perform twice?
That's right. But my first real, I had his records back in the early 70s, but my first real, the time where he really captivated me the first time was from a Chicago-based TV show, public TV show called Soundstage.
Sure, remember it well.
This fall of '74, there was an episode called Arlo's Gang with Arlo Guthrie, Hoyt Axton, and Steve Goodman, and he just mesmerized me, you even from the TV screen. And then the first time I got to see him live was in Eugene, Oregon, and a lot of you here know of Randy Newman. And if I say Randy Newman to you, probably the first thought is his hit, Short People. Well, this was right when Short People came out, and he had the ultimate short person opening for him.
Steve.
He was only 5'2", and Goodman said, Randy Newman's an equal opportunity employer. He says, I'm going to have to get stilts for this gig.
Clay, you say you were mesmerized by Steve Goodman. And I look back and remember, as I'm sure you do, a lot of performers who mesmerize you. That does not automatically translate into years and years and years of work to produce this biography, Facing the Music. What was it about Steve that compelled you to do this?
Well, he was quite the wide-ranging songwriter. He could write the funniest songs you could ever imagine. He could write very incisive social commentary. the
He
most.
wasn't. He was no slacker at love songs either.
I wooed my wife with his songs. Literally, I sent her tapes.
Where's she sitting?
She's
Oh,
right
that's
here.
right.
And you know, I mean that alone is a huge factor. But there was something that I mean most people did not know, and he kept it a secret.
Stevie was
as long
sick.
as that he was diagnosed with leukemia. He had a death sentence over.
He was 20 when he was diagnosed.
That's
right.
right.
Something like
That's
that.
right. And I think that, I mean, whether consciously or not, the songs that he wrote, I mean, if you really look at them, at least half of them all have a theme, directly or indirectly, of mortality, of death hanging over our shoulders, of how are we going to live this life, this finite time that we have. And, you know, a lot of you nodded your heads about Go Cubs Go. Well, Go Cubs Go, there's a story behind that about how that came about, and it involves WGN. But what I want to start with is the dying Cub fans' last request. Now you tell me how affecting that is. It's one of those.
That's an unbelievably moving song.
You laugh and you cry at the same time. And he insisted that it was not an autobiographical song. You know, he was talking about some old guy, he said, but we all know different.
Well, but you're right, and one of the distinguishing things about Steve's life is knowing that he has a death sentence over his head. Were I to know that, I would literally go down to the Billy Goat and just drink myself to death and insult every single person I know. Steve did the contrary thing. He lived his estimable life. You talk to anybody, and it's all over this book, Facing the Music, the nicest guy in the world.
Generous, self-deprecating. I mean, but he was driven. He was certainly
no
driven.
doubt, no doubt.
And the fascinating thing to me, one of them certainly is, I mean, you automatically think when you get a diagnosis like that it changes your life, and it no doubt did change Steve's life. But he was driven long before that, and that was one of the things I was really digging to find out. And I talked with scores of grade school, Temple friends, and high school classmates, and it was clear he was going to make his mark on this world. However he could.
Before we take a commercial break, because it will be needed for people to absorb this number, how many people did you interview for this book?
1,067. And then there's about an equal number who helped out in other ways with photographs and news clippings and all kinds of ways.
You remember that number? More than 1,000 people, including me. Let that sink in while you listen to some commercials. Wasn't that brilliant reading of a commercial? You guys. Yeah, not too self-aggrandizing. Clay Eals has spent years interviewing more than 1,000 people to write the definitive biography of Steve Goodman. Facing the Music is the name of the book. He interviewed Studs for this.
That's
Studs
right.
Terkel.
That's
He wrote,
right.
And he also wrote a short preface for the book.
Well, you know, how that came about is kind of fun. When the book was almost done being laid out, I wanted to find somebody who could blurb the book.
Mm-hmm.
A blurb is the quote on the back that
Saying the greatest book about music ever written. That's a blurb.
I called Studs. This was last December, and got his home, and a young man answered the phone, and I said,
JR, his caretaker.
There we go. And he says he's taking a nap.
Yeah.
And I said, well, when can I call back? And he said, well, you don't have to worry about that. Just email him. I said, Studs is 94. He does email? He said, sure, just email him. So I did. I emailed him a request, and the next morning, bing, in my inbox, here's a message from Studs, and it says, here's your blurb.
Wow.
And I was a little stunned, and I open it up, and it's just this beautifully written piece about Goodman.
Yeah.
But you know, it's about Goodman. It's not. He hadn't read the book. It's just about Goodman, and I thought, what do I do about this?
Yeah, here's a good blurb. I haven't read this book, but Steve Goodman was a really cool guy.
And then, you know, a half hour later, it dawned on me, you know, this guy has written your preface for your book. And so I got back to him and I said, would it be all right with you if I used the preface? And he said, sure. And then I thought, well, let's move forward here. And do you have some time next month? I replied to him to read a little bit of the book and possibly blurb it as well. And he wrote back, and this is the punchline. He wrote back, I'm on a deadline for my memoir.
Yeah.
I am the deadline. He says, I have to finish it before I kick off. And so nothing before March can I do. I tell you, that's an email I'm going to save.
Yeah. Well, he did. For those of you out there, he did finish it, and it's scheduled to be published this fall. And it really ought to be something. The family of my lovely friend Minette, Steve's mom and his wife, didn't participate in this, Clay. Well, how come?
There's really no way for me to know precisely.
Yeah, sure.
It's hard to jump inside somebody's head. She was probably among the first 5 people I tried to enlist for this, and I had breakfast with her for an hour. It was right after a Steve Goodman tribute weekend in Washington, D.C., put on by the World Folk Music Association, and she had attended that. And, imagine any of you in this room, or you, Rick, what if somebody did a biography on you? Probably.
Good God, I'd have to have them killed. I couldn't allow. No, I could not allow
possibly
something like that.
the people who would be the last ones to open themselves up are the ones who are closest to you.
Yeah, because I know Minette and adore her, and in many ways, it's you in speaking about a book like this or about a life, you have to relive it, and that can be sometimes very, very painful.
Yes. I mean, we're all humans, and we're not. None of us is a saint.
Yeah.
but I just was determined this book needed to be written. I mean, there was a glaring need for this book. Why write the 50th book on Elvis? And there was nothing done on Goodman, and I want to assure everybody that even though Minette was not. I wasn't able to interview her afresh. She's far from absent from the book.
Oh my God!
And
No.
She has been interviewed in other contexts, and I
Sure.
have quoted from that. And you can't tell Steve's story without talking about his relationships with the people closest to him. But you mentioned the more than 1,000 interviews. That may seem like just plain nuts, and in a way it is.
A little bit.
But it's the nature of the guy. I think if there is a lesson in Steve Goodman's life, it transcends music. It's
This is your
it's
book.
about we are not meant to be hermits in this life. We're meant to connect. We're meant to engage, inspire other people. And he, people say he lived more life in his 36 years than most of us will, and twice that if we get that far. And there were just when you. As a journalist, you love to have referrals. You just love, people say you got to talk to somebody. But after a while, every single person I talked to would
You got to
say,
talk to. I did that with you.
Yes.
I did that with you. Facing the Music is the name of the book. It is the definitive biography of Steve Goodman. Clay will be at the Old Town School of Folk Music at 4544 North Lincoln Avenue today. Panelists include the, good Lord, Ed Holstein and Michael Smith, two of my favorite people on the planet, Earl Pianki of the Earl of Old Town, and others. That's 2 to 4 today. We'll take a little commercial break and come back, get some news, and continue talking about the one and only Steve Goodman.
Now, back to the Sunday papers. Here's Rick Kogan.
These people from the great Chicago Places and Spaces tour are delightful, as is Clay Eals, who has spent God knows how many hours writing Facing the Music. It's the official, definitive Steve Goodman biography. It's an old story that I've maybe told before, but talk about the first time that Steve Goodman met Arlo Guthrie, where it was and what happened, because I love this story.
Well, Arlo tells the definitive version of it, obviously. This was early in 1971 at the Quiet Nightclub on Belmont.
Just near the L upstairs.
It's just near the L, and if you go by there and try to find it, it's a tanning salon now, upstairs in this old brick building. And Arlo was playing there, and one night, Richard Harding, the owner of the club, decided he wanted to put Arlo and Steve together. Now, Richard Harding knew that Goodman didn't know how long he had to live, literally. And Richard told me, I wanted Steve to have a hit sometime before he was gone.
Let me interrupt you for a second, Clay. How is Richard? Do you know?
Recently, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think he's still around.
Yeah, last time I saw him, he was driving a cab.
Yeah.
And it was sort of shocking, but sorry.
But he's so many people. He's typical of so many people I talked with who their hearts just leap to their sleeve in talking about Goodman. It's
Yeah.
like a repressed emotion.
Sure.
People, there's scores of very well-known names I was able to talk with, and they're used to talking about themselves and get tired of that, but they haven't been able to talk about Goodman for decades.
Yeah.
Anyway, to get back to City
Sure.
of New Orleans, Richard Richard Harding pulled Arlo after a show and into his office, and Goodman and both were there kind of sheepish, and as Rich Warren recounts, who was standing outside the door, he says, Richard Harding is bellowing, "Play him the train song! Play him the goddamn train song!" You know, I mean, it was just yelling at Goodman, and apparently they don't quite know what to do. But then Arlo embellishes his story, by the way.
Yeah.
But I mean, he says, songs. I don't like songs. I hate songs. I don't want to hear songs. But then as Arlo's story goes, he says, "All right, you buy me a beer, and as long you can sit there, and as long as this beer lasts, you can do anything you want." And then the punchline is, "And that was one of the finest beers of my life." And Arlo told me, he said, in my story, I make it sound like I was more of a butthead than I really was.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it didn't happen instantly afterward. He said that Goodman played City of New Orleans for him, gave him a lead sheet, gave him a tape, and Arlo put it in his guitar case, took it home to Massachusetts, set the lead sheet on his piano, where it sat for 6-7 months. He didn't do anything with it. And then he started picking it up and playing it, and the whole story of how he did his version, which is so very different from
yeah.
Steve's version, is a fascinating story in itself in the recording studio.
Well, it's one of hundreds of fascinating stories in this book. Was this book, I got to believe, Clay, at some point, someone, maybe your lovely wife, said, "Okay, honey, you're done." I mean, it seems like one of these projects that could trap a person forever. What was that moment? Did you do that? Did you say, look, you got to get a job, give up the book, finish the book? When did you decide, at what moment did you decide to say to yourself, okay, I'm done?
Well, a real key juncture in that regard was getting a publisher.
Yeah.
And if any of you has been involved in the publishing world, really, publishers today, it's not like when we were kids and publishers take a chance and you get to know about new people.
Sure.
They just want us to know about the people we already know about. And I have a rejection letter file of probably 70, 80 of them.
Were many of them daunted by the size of the book?
No. What they
Really?
said, it wasn't.
Like, who's Steve Goodman?
With a book, you're supposed to have a proposal and sample chapters, and I had written 3 or 4 or 5, depending on what time period you're talking about, back in 2004 or 2005. And 201, when I got a rejection letter that wasn't a form letter, they would say, "We love your proposal, we love your sample chapters, but Steve Goodman is just not well enough known to take a chance on."
Wow.
And
Wow.
I ran into this publisher in Toronto who took a chance and instantly snapped it up. I mean, instantly. I'm talking about from the time he got 5 sample chapters. It was Thursday afternoon till Monday morning. He said, "You've got a contract." I mean, that is instant. And he let me do the book that I want. I mean, he's taken a terrific chance on this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what publisher would let you do an 800-page book on somebody who's not a household word?
Yeah, I'll be very interested to find out from you once you get on the road how this sells outside Chicago. It's going to sell like crazy here.
I think that Chicago had to be the place for it to be the launch, obviously.
Absolutely.
But I think that there's a story beyond the Chicago base of it this is a very compelling human story that anybody can relate to. Of course, the core market is the baby boomers. If Goodman had lived, he would be almost 59 right now. And so that's the age of the people, largely.
But also the book, the other thing about the book, at least for me being a Chicagoan, is this is the story of an era as well as the story of a great
Well, as I said
singer-songwriter.
before, he touched so many people and he engaged so many people. Many people are musicians because of him. In fact, the CD that comes with it, which is of songs that were written in tribute to Goodman after his death, that I just stumbled upon one after the other. Some of them are literally saying that they got into music because of seeing Goodman, and they learned guitar from seeing Goodman. And I just think there's a very human story here that transcends the music of it and the whole. What do we do with this finite time that we all have? I mean, what are we all going to do before we die? I mean, Goodman faced that. He had that in his awareness every day of his adult life.
Wow. It is an amazing book, Facing the Music, the biography of Steve Goodman, prefaced by Studs Terkel, forward by Arlie Guthrie. You can meet Clay Eals today from 2 to 4 at the Old Town School of Folk Music, 4544 North Lincoln Avenue. You can also say hello to my great pals Ed Holstein and Michael Smith and Earl Pianki, who ran the famous, one of the great bars in the history of this town, the Earl of Old Town.
Rick, can I jump in and also say that the moderator for this is the great Roy Leonard?
Oh, of course, who used to play Stevie all the time.
And not only played him, but he had Goodman on his show probably 10, 12 times. Yeah. Steve just would wander in and Roy would put him on, and some of the best interviews of Steve ever done were done by Roy Leonard, and I'm so glad that we're going to be able to hear his voice this afternoon and see him. He's
the real deal.
He's
man.
One of the very few people who has read this book, all 400,000 words, and I'm
Roy's got a lot of time on his hands. Man, I got a job here. I got another job. Clay, it's a remarkable accomplishment. Congratulations. And next week, for those of you listening, I will play some of this. We didn't get a chance today because Clay's too interesting. Steve being interviewed, which is part of the CD that comes with this remarkable book, Steve Goodman, Facing the Music. Congratulations.
Thank you, Rick.
And to you, too, the long-suffering wife. We'll be right back.
News Talk 720. Now, back to the Sunday papers. WGN. Here's Rick Kogan.
Well, the folks from the great Chicago Places and Spaces tour are either in witness protection or just shy. Could be a combination of both. So I'm keeping Clay Eals to introduce you. They demanded that they not go on, but then we hear some music. Clay, what are we going to hear?
Well, this tribute CD has 18 songs that either mention Steve significantly or are in tribute to him. And the one that we're going to hear, one of your favorites, Rick, is by Chris Farrell, who is going to be this afternoon at the Old Town School panel at 2 o'clock. Yeah. And he will play this song live for us there. Chris, if you're listening, I hope you're ready.
I love it because it's about the neighborhood in which I grew up.
It's called Old Town, Old Friend. And if you listen carefully, you will hear repeatedly the line from Goodman's most famous song.
Old town, old friend, there's a song in the air, something to ask me and something to share. I saw the moon in a smoky spotlight, heard someone sing in Old Town tonight. Sometimes it's laughter and sometimes it's tears. Too many hours and most of my years reaching for something and holding on tight. Old Town, old friend, I'm with you tonight. Out in this new world, it's hustle and bucks, and stay in the race, boy, or you're out of luck. But out where the dreamers are traveling light, there's still someone singing in Old Town tonight. town, old friend, who knows what it will bring. But whatever comes, we'll have something to sing. Sing it all morning, all evening, and then deep in our dreams, we'll sing it again. Good morning, America, good night, Irene, and all of the moments that fall in between. Out where the dreamers are traveling light, there's still someone singing in Old Town tonight. Good morning, America, good night, Irene, and all of the moments that fall in between. Out where the dreamers are traveling light, there's still someone singing in Old Town tonight. There's still someone singing in Old Town tonight.
What do you think, folks? That's a nice tune, Clay Eals. That's a really, really nice tune.
The
Chris
remarkable
Farrell.
thing about this CD is that all of the musicians contributed these songs gratis.
Wow.
They loved
And
Goodman
these are
so
not,
much.
These are not, before we go to break and go to Dean Richards' show, these are not songs that, you kind of commissioned for this. These are
No. I mean, just like people kept referring me to people, I kept discovering them. I thought, well, one or two or three, and I'll mention them in the last chapter. But then there are more than 25 of these songs, and I thought, we got to let people hear these, and the idea of a CD was a natural.
Well, that's a sort of telling thing that so many performers, unbidden, just decided to write tribute songs to this performer. I'm not sure.
I can't think
I
of anybody
can't
else who had that kind of
inspire that.
inspiration with other people.
Yeah. What's the
It's-
price?
what it does is it documents, it's evidence that Goodman's music lives on. He died 23 years ago,
Yeah.
but this guy not only was everywhere, he is everywhere.
Oh, very interesting. Do you have a website of your own?
Yes, it's just myname.com, Clay Eals, ClayEals.com. You can find all that you need to know about the book. There's a lot of information on there. All
There also-
2,200 names from the acknowledgments are in there, including yours, Rick.
2,200 names from the acknowledgments. And also, the other thing we haven't mentioned is the stunning photos in here.
There are more than 540 photos. 73 of them are in color. And what I was
And
really,
many never seen before.
well, yes, the people who really knew Goodman have probably seen the same images over and over again. And I really tried to stay away from those. These
Yeah.
are things that only a few people have seen, and people were so generous with their photos.
Well, you seem like, I'm not surprised, you seem like a really nice, decent fellow with a really nice wife. And before we throw this to Dean Richards and his usual collection of stars and smart people, Clay Eals, there are a couple more things you've got coming up. If
You just
wanna-
mentioned Niles. That's where Goodman spent his high school years, and in high school he went to Maine East in Park Ridge. And those of you who can't make it this afternoon to the Old Town School, there are two other events associated with this book. One is at Maine East High School next Wednesday, the 23rd at 3:30. And then there's a big blowout Goodman tribute concert the next night, 7 p.m., May 24th, out in Woodstock at the
At
Stage
the Opera
Left
House.
Cafe at the Woodstock.
What a great place that is.
And both of these events are free.
And you've also got, mentioning Maine East and Park Ridge in that area, not only did the Cyanus kids go to Maine East, you've got Hillary